And I'm going to mostly talk as an economist and as an economic historian, and I'm going to avoid political issues as much as possible, and perhaps somebody else could talk more about that. Now, a little bit of background on NB Power. NB Power started around 1918. It really hit the news in the election of 1925 when the Vigneault government, a liberal government, proposed that NB, the New Brunswick government, the New Brunswick Electric Power Commission, follow the model that was happening in Ontario and that it become a provincial government-owned utility and start by developing the Grand Falls site as the center of a public power system in New Brunswick to serve the interests of the people of New Brunswick. Well, that was the issue of the election of 1925. Premier Vigneault lost that election. The consequence was that the Grand Falls hydroelectric site was transferred over to international paper, and it became a corporate site. The New Brunswick Electric Power Commission didn't do much for the next 25 years. Nothing much happened. The next intense period of sort of public interest in the New Brunswick Electric Power Commission was in the waning years of the Second World War and the late 1940s, when during the Reconstruction period, when people were thinking about what's going to happen after the Second World War, people in New Brunswick, some within the government, some who were associated with the government, identified what they considered to be or kind of articulated what was becoming a common understanding, that the problem with New Brunswick and why it didn't attract any of the war industries was simply that it didn't have any electricity. And that electricity was the fueling system for most of the mass production technologies and the material conversion technologies of the early 20th century. And without those, the availability of electricity, nothing much happened in New Brunswick. New Brunswick didn't get a share of federal production facilities during the Second World War. The upshot of this was that Hugh John Fleming, when he was leader of the opposition, he was with the Conservative Party, developed his election platform in 1952. A key component of that was his power strategy, and a public power strategy. To quote Hugh John Fleming, "Power is the key, which will unlock the resources of New Brunswick." Now, I don't think Hugh John Fleming would actually have said it that way, but you get the point. This was a key part of his industrial policy, and that policy was a public power policy, which included the provincial government taking over all of the generating capacity in electricity, including the Grand Falls site, all of the small electrical utilities, the small distribution company, the entire transmission system, to create one monopoly provider of electricity. The logic of this system was what we might call a power for industry strategy. Now, at this time, to put it blunt, there was no industry. There wasn't much in New Brunswick in 1952, a couple of small pulp and paper mills. There was the big international pulp and paper mill in the north, which is a separate story, but the local conglomerates were not here and were relatively unimportant at that time. The power strategy was put together by the Premier's office, with, especially with one economic advisor, William Y. Smith, as part of a strategy to attract specifically foreign investment to engage in resource processing. And it wasn't pulp and paper they were interested in, it was mining. In the early 1950s, the base metal deposits of northern New Brunswick had been discovered. There was the potential for processing of those minerals. Also, there was a discovery of manganese, which actually was a much bigger issue in terms of their planning, manganese in the Woodstock area, which was a key component with a short supply in the United States for the production of high quality iron and steel products.